They were gods on screen, but behind the scenes, Robert Duvall watched them shatter his sacred artistic code. Find out which megastars earned his lifetime contempt through chaos, cruelty, and the ultimate betrayal of their craft. The quiet dignity of a master. To understand these deep, lasting feuds, one must first appreciate the man's beginnings and the disciplined foundation of his character. Born to an admiral in the United States Navy and raised in a military household, Duvall's early life was steeped in discipline, order, and a quiet sense of duty. Yet, it was the raw, emotional crucible of New York's esteemed neighborhood playhouse school of the theater that truly forged his artistic code. There, in the rigorous heart of the method, he trained alongside two other aspiring titans, Al Pacino and Dustin Hoffman. Duvall learned to value the truth found in restraint, embracing a form of method acting that prized stillness, psychological interiority, and silence over any kind of theatrical spectacle. This foundation instilled in him an immutable belief that authenticity, unadorned and uncompromised, was the single most valuable currency an actor possessed. As his career blossomed from humble off-Broadway roles to monumental cinematic achievements, from the quiet mystery of Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird to the chilling, contained gravitas of Tom Hagen in The Godfather, Duvall never abandoned this rigorous code. His presence, often subtle, was the anchor of any cast, the reliable, disciplined center around which dramatic chaos often spun. He was the quiet professional who did his work without fanfare, believing the craft should speak for itself. It is this unwavering commitment to artistic integrity that makes his eventual revelations so shocking. At a time in his life when most legends seek only quiet reflection and nostalgia, Duvall did the opposite. He broke his decades of silence and named 6 great figures who, in his estimation, had become the spiritual enemies of honest acting. These were not trivial disagreements. They were philosophical battles waged over the very soul of the art form, a conflict between true artistry and the corrupting forces of ego, commerce, and spectacle. Duvall witnessed what he believed was a fundamental corruption of integrity, where self-aggrandizement, corporate ambition, and financial greed eclipsed the patient, disciplined work of the actor. The sheer volume of wealth, fame, and acclaim surrounding these figures only amplified the betrayal in Duvall's eyes. The bigger the star, the greater the artistic crime. His personal blacklist included his loyal brother, Al Pacino, whose friendship crumbled over a contract, his charismatic mentor, Francis Ford Coppola, who Duvall felt betrayed him for the sake of a perfect shot, and the god of cinema whose indiscipline he despised, Marlon Brando. Prepare yourself for the untold reasons behind these legendary feuds. These revelations pull back the elegant veneer of Hollywood history, exposing the raw, human conflicts that simmered behind the scenes for years. They remind us that for a dedicated artist like Duvall, the work was everything, and any compromise was a profound offense against the moral structure of his life. The stage was set not for a family drama, but for a bitter war of principles that would span 4 decades and define his enduring legacy. The greatest betrayal, however, was not one of money or fame, but one of brotherhood. Next, we look at how the shared dream between Robert Duvall and Al Pacino shattered over a single, insulting number on a contract. The quiet dignity of Tom Hagen would not be bought so cheaply. When brotherhood turned to barter, the price of Tom Hagen. In the early 1970s, before the fame became suffocating, few Hollywood friendships burned brighter than the one between Robert Duvall and Al Pacino. They were more than colleagues, they were brothers in ambition, sharing a humble apartment in Beverly Glen, splitting the meager rent, and subsisting on canned noodles while dreaming the same impossible dream of cinematic greatness. They shared the same language of the method, the same dedication to their characters, and the same hopeful hunger for success. This shared struggle and mutual respect formed the emotional core that would later make their professional parting so profoundly painful. This brotherhood was perfectly captured on screen in The Godfather, a film that immortalized their connection. Duvall's Tom Hagen, the cool, disciplined consigliere, was the perfect foil to Pacino's volatile, slow-burning Michael Corleone. Their on-screen chemistry was not merely acting, it was the echo of shared history, the comfortable silence of two men who understood each other's rhythms and trusted each other implicitly. This synergy turned the film into an epic, and their professional reputations soared, securing their place among the most celebrated actors of their generation. They were, in the public eye, inseparable artistic partners who achieved greatness together. But the bonds of fraternity proved fragile when placed under the unforgiving weight of Hollywood commerce. As the 1980s drew to a close and preparations began for The Godfather Part 3, The shared vision that once united them fractured over a single, insulting number on a studio contract that exposed the industry's brutal hierarchy. When Paramount Pictures sent out the contracts, the figures revealed a stark and humiliating imbalance. Al Pacino was offered $5 million plus 5% of the film's profits, a spectacular sum befitting a major star. Robert Duvall, the Academy Award nominee and moral center of the saga, was offered a $1 million flat. The message was unmistakable, and it cut Duvall to the quick. It was a financial judgment that declared Tom Hagen, the cool, calculating moral center of the saga, worth only 1/5 of the volatile central figure he supported. The contract was a public record of the studio's disrespect. For Duvall, the insult was never about the money itself. He was already wealthy. It was about the respect, or lack thereof, that the number represented. It was a profound underestimation of the character, Tom Hagen, and the actor who had defined him. How could a film about the fierce bonds of family, about loyalty and blood, disregard those very principles off-screen? Duvall simply folded the papers, stood up, and walked away from the negotiation table, refusing to return just to be someone's backdrop. Hours later, a single elegant fax arrived on the desk of director Francis Ford Coppola. That sentence, sharp and decisive, ended 2 decades of friendship and collaboration. Duvall retreated to the integrity of his Virginia farm, choosing roles that felt honest and true, where the size of the paycheck was secondary to the integrity of the performance, while Pacino continued as the face of blockbuster ambition and cinematic chaos. The final heartbreaking confirmation of their irreconcilable rift came years later, at the 2011 Oscars reunion for The Godfather. Both men stood only a few feet apart in the glare of the lights, their faces blank, their eyes deliberately locked on anything but each other. The deep, familial connection that had fueled one of the greatest films ever made had been extinguished by a studio's calculator. The betrayal was complete. Yet it was facilitated by another figure Duvall held dear, a man who should have fought for him. Next, we explore the complexities of a mentorship that turned into quiet contempt when Duvall realized the man he revered, Francis Ford Coppola, was just as complicit in the betrayal. The teacher's cruelty, betrayal in the boardroom, and the jungle. In the quiet, intensely principled world of Robert Duvall, the loss of Francis Ford Coppola was perhaps more profound than the loss of Al Pacino. Pacino was a brother. Coppola was the charismatic mentor, the visionary who had first identified and nurtured the disciplined talent that lay beneath Duvall's reserved exterior. It was a single line uttered by Coppola in 1971, "He's the Tom Hagen I've been looking for," that had irrevocably changed the course of Duvall's career and granted him a path to cinematic immortality. Duvall had given him the performance of a lifetime. In return, he expected loyalty. For years, Duvall viewed Coppola with a reverence usually reserved for a master teacher. But the sheer, relentless pressure of making epic cinema eventually exposed a fissure in that bond, revealing a side of the maestro that Duvall found ruthless, detached, and unforgiving. The first undeniable cracks appeared not in a quiet boardroom, but in the sweltering, chaotic jungles of the Philippines during the filming of Apocalypse Now, a production notorious for its excesses, its chaotic environment, and its high cost in human spirit. During the intense, iconic napalm scene, where Duvall's Colonel Kilgore delivered his memorable lines under blinding heat, the actor was pushed past his physical limits. Duvall collapsed from dehydration, his lips cracked and bleeding from the extreme conditions. Yet the director looked upon his collapsed star, seemingly consumed only by the frame, and offered a cold, detached instruction. "Do it again. The light isn't right." Duvall, ever the consummate professional, obeyed. But in that moment, something essential shifted. Duvall began to see his teacher less as a visionary partner and more as another figure of unbridled, almost cruel genius, much like Marlon Brando. The technical pursuit of art came first, always, even at the expense of human well-being. Duvall realized that the genius he admired was capable of the same disregard for the actor's humanity as any other tyrant. He saw the ultimate artistic flaw, a man willing to sacrifice his collaborators for the sake of a perfect aesthetic that had nothing to do with emotion. A decade later, the financial betrayal of The Godfather Part 3 destroyed what little respect was left. While the studio was ultimately responsible for the egregious salary discrepancy with Al Pacino, Coppola was the ultimate author of the Corleone family saga, the man who constantly preached about loyalty and the sanctity of the family unit. When the studio offered Duvall a mere $1 million, a fraction of his co-star's compensation, Coppola's silence on the matter felt like a betrayal of his own artistic philosophy and a tacit acceptance of the studio's slight. The subsequent contract betrayal felt like the final corporate endorsement of that on-set ruthlessness. Duvall's refusal was a very public declaration of his principles. "I won't act in a film about a family if that family doesn't respect each other." The message was aimed squarely at Coppola, who Duvall felt had allowed the integrity of his cast and the entire narrative structure to be undermined by the greed of the studio. In the aftermath, Coppola attempted to apologize, even sending handwritten letters to the actor, trying desperately to mend the profound rift. But Duvall, a man of quiet conviction, stayed silent. The trust was irreparably broken, and he never met with Coppola again. What began as an artistic admiration of the highest order ended as quiet contempt. The man who had once placed Duvall on the path to stardom had, through ambition and compromise, become a stranger. This artistic rift reveals a profound truth about Duvall. He reserved his deepest enmity for those who squandered their genius. The most profound disappointment was yet to come, as he faced his childhood idol, the one actor whose methods he had studied with religious fervor, Marlon Brando. Chaos disguised as genius, the deconstruction of an idol. Before the betrayals of the 1970s, there was an idol, a figure of such towering mythic genius that Robert Duvall had studied his every breath as a young actor, Marlon Brando. Brando was the god of American acting, the seismic force behind films like On the Waterfront and A Streetcar Named Desire. For Duvall, meeting Brando on the set of The Godfather in 1971 was meant to be a moment of professional reverence. Instead, it became the great, devastating disillusionment of his career. When Brando arrived on set, 2 hours late, sunglasses on with 3 assistants trailing behind him, the illusion of the artistic god instantly shattered. Duvall, a man of military precision and respect for his colleagues, watched in dismay as Brando refused to rehearse, demanded his lines be taped to walls or even the backs of other actors, and unilaterally changed dialogue without any warning, often derailing the complex staging of an entire scene. Duvall was witnessing what he later termed chaos disguised as genius. He saw a breathtaking talent that was utterly corrupted by ego and a profound disregard for the ensemble. The core of Duvall's critique was not jealousy, but a profound philosophical objection to the lack of discipline and the professional courtesy required to sustain great cinema. Brando's methods, while yielding magnificent moments on screen, systematically sabotaged the rhythm of everyone around him. Duvall felt that while Brando was undeniably the soul of the film, he was simultaneously the enemy of every actor inside it, creating a vortex of instability where consistency and professional craft could not thrive. The belief that genius excused bad behavior was intolerable to a man of Duvall's strict code. This artistic rift was cemented by a number of cynical, commercial, and political actions that followed. When Paramount Pictures quietly paid Brando an extra $50,000 bonus simply to placate his difficult demands and keep him on set, Duvall was disgusted. He viewed it as the ultimate corruption of art, where unprofessional conduct and tardiness were rewarded with financial gain, fundamentally undermining the very concept of shared artistic effort. It sent the message that the industry valued star power over professionalism. The final act of betrayal, in Duvall's eyes, was committed at the Academy Awards in 1973. When Brando won the Best Actor trophy, he sent a Native American activist, Sacheen Littlefeather, to reject the award live on television as a form of political protest. Half of America applauded the bold political statement. Duvall saw a profound betrayal of the craft they shared. He was convinced that Brando cared more about making a shocking political statement than honoring the collective artistic effort and the industry that had enabled his genius. As Duvall reportedly told a friend, he turned our work into a protest. From that moment, the initial admiration Duvall held for the legend completely curdled into contempt. The break was absolute. In 2004, when Marlon Brando's life reached its conclusion, Duvall refused to attend the funeral, a final, cold statement against the man who had failed his ideals. Instead, he reportedly sent his estranged director, Francis Ford Coppola, a small, white card with 3 words that eloquently summed up his feeling about the saga and the man who had taught him so much, then represented everything he despised. Let it end. The tragedy of Brando was the corruption of a god. If you appreciate this unvarnished look at the principles behind Hollywood's golden age, please remember to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We dive deep into the integrity and elegance of cinema's past every single week. Now, let us continue our journey. The subsequent fight was against a different kind of tyranny, the tyranny of the machine. Next, we explore the shocking story of the acclaimed director who built a prison of perfection, leading Duvall to call him a genius without a heart, Stanley Kubrick. The morgue of perfection, the actor's enemy. The previous conflicts were deeply personal, rooted in friendship and professional betrayal, but Robert Duvall's profound disdain for the famed filmmaker Stanley Kubrick was purely philosophical. Kubrick, celebrated globally as a meticulous, even obsessive visionary, represented everything Duvall despised about artistic pursuit unmoored from human decency. At a 2010 Hollywood Reporter roundtable, years after both men were secure in their legacies, Duvall stunned the entire industry with a cold, absolute statement. To me, the great Stanley Kubrick was an actor's enemy. This severe judgment was not delivered lightly. It stemmed from a lifetime of artistic conviction that valued spontaneity, emotional truth, and respect for the actor's instrument over technical perfection. Duvall viewed Kubrick's notorious method of forcing actors through 50, 60, or even 100 takes as a form of cruelty disguised as a quest for perfection. How, Duvall often wondered, could a director possibly discern the authentic emotional difference between the first take, fresh and immediate, and the 70th, drained of all vitality? The repetition, in Duvall's view, was a destructive act. For Duvall, Kubrick did not direct actors. He systematically exhausted them, reducing them to automated props in a carefully lit world. This deeply held belief was painfully reinforced after Duvall viewed the behind-the-scenes documentary detailing the making of The Shining. The footage captured actress Shelley Duvall, no relation to Robert, being pushed to the absolute breaking point by the director's relentless demands. She was filmed swinging a baseball bat 127 times, while Kubrick shouted coldly, "Do it again." Robert Duvall viewed this as nothing less than emotional torture, inflicted in the name of technical control and aesthetic symmetry. The sheer spectacle of the exhaustion horrified him, solidifying his belief that such extreme measures diminished the human spirit required for genuine artistic expression. The man was prioritizing the camera over the main character. A chilling personal anecdote further cemented this contempt. Kubrick once invited Duvall to discuss a role in his planned film, The Aryan Papers. Instead of engaging in the collaborative artistic discussion Duvall expected, the filmmaker spoke for a full 30 minutes, not about character, motivation, or emotion, but about lighting patterns and camera rhythm. Duvall left the meeting profoundly unsettled. He later recalled to a reporter that the air in that room was colder than a morgue, a metaphor for the intellectual detachment he believed defined Kubrick's approach to human performance. The director was a master technician, but one who seemed to view the actor as an unpredictable variable, to be subdued and controlled. When critics and cinephiles hailed Kubrick as a visionary, Robert Duvall consistently refused to join the chorus of praise. He acknowledged the man's immense technical genius, but always qualified his respect with a severe moral caveat. In a later piece for Esquire, Duvall delivered the final, definitive assessment that resonated throughout Hollywood. He was a genius, but a genius without a heart. It was a sentiment that revealed the bedrock of Robert Duvall's entire career. If the process stripped the performer of their humanity, then the resulting art was inherently flawed, regardless of its visual splendor. He saw the same obsession with the surface, the same theatricality that risked masking an empty core in one of his most prominent contemporary rivals. Next, we explore the quiet hostility that simmered for decades between Robert Duvall and Robert De Niro, a Cold War fought between two masters of the method. The silence versus the spectacle, Hollywood's great method divide. Robert Duvall and Robert De Niro never exchanged harsh words on camera, never engaged in a public shouting match. Yet the quiet hostility that simmered between the two titans of method acting was both real and lasting. Behind every polite, distant handshake at an award ceremony lay a profound philosophical disagreement, a cold war fought over how a serious actor should approach his craft. Duvall once summed up his contempt with a single cutting remark that sounded like praise. "He's good at playing Italians. Very good." That line was not meant to celebrate De Niro's ability to transform. It was Duvall's elegant way of saying that De Niro had allowed his artistry to become a spectacle, that he relied on costumes, accents, and extreme physical changes to mask what Duvall perceived as a hollow emotional core. Their rivalry truly intensified in the 1970s, after The Godfather Part 2 cemented both men as the faces of serious American acting. They were two masters of the same dramatic school, but their paths diverged radically in their execution of the method. While De Niro shaved his head for Taxi Driver and gained 60 pounds for Raging Bull, transformations hailed by critics as the pinnacle of immersive performance, Duvall quietly built his acclaimed characters through silence, restraint, and subtraction. He sought to strip away the performance to find the essential human truth, believing the character lived in the eyes and the quiet reaction, not the outward costume. The physical changes, in Duvall's view, were impressive window dressing that ultimately distracted from the deeper, more vulnerable work required. This conviction formed the basis of his veiled attack on De Niro's extreme style. Duvall offered a quote that became his artistic manifesto. "The work isn't about weight gain, it's in the silence." To him, De Niro's obsession with outward transformation was a form of vanity, proof that obsession could tragically masquerade as depth, substituting technical effort for genuine emotional risk. He expressed to colleagues that actors who worship the physical extremes of the method risked becoming parodies of themselves, chasing external novelty rather than internal truth. Hollywood, however, adored De Niro's transformations, often confusing tremendous physical effort with profound artistic depth. This popularity only solidified Duvall's feeling that the industry valued the dramatic gesture over the quiet, disciplined work. The distance between the two actors became a conscious act, a professional avoidance that lasted for decades, reinforcing their philosophical split. Duvall saw De Niro as the perfect symbol of how the method, when taken to an extreme of surface-level fidelity, could lose its soul. Years later, when De Niro, the acclaimed dramatic powerhouse, began appearing in lighthearted comedies such as Meet the Parents and Analyze This, Duvall reportedly muttered a final dismissive critique: "There's the mask cracking." It was the ultimate judgment from Duvall. The dramatic mask was not needed for comedy, and in its absence, the integrity of the actor was exposed, revealing the calculated choices underneath. De Niro, ever composed, refused to engage in the feud publicly, offering only the diplomatic statement, "Bob's a serious actor, we just have different energies." The contrast between the two men was defined by this fundamental artistic disagreement. Yet, Duvall's most bitter confrontation was reserved for a figure who had given him the ultimate validation, an Academy Award. We want to know, whose artistic code do you agree with more? The quiet restraint of Duvall or the spectacular transformation of De Niro? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. But the final, most public act of defiance was still to come. Next, we explore the profound irony of the Oscar that left a scar, and the director Duvall deliberately refused to acknowledge on the most famous stage in the world. The cost of the trophy, the director left unnamed. In the life of Robert Duvall, the deepest resentments were reserved not for those who failed him, but for those who tested his artistic conviction to its breaking point. The great, painful irony of his career is that his first and only Academy Award for Best Actor was won for a film helmed by a director he would come to publicly ignore, Bruce Beresford. The film was Tender Mercies, a quiet, deeply felt drama about a washed-up country singer that should have represented the pinnacle of professional triumph, but instead left an indelible scar of artistic compromise. The conflict between Duvall and Beresford began immediately on the set in Texas. Duvall, drawing on his decades of observational skill and disciplined training, had meticulously crafted the rhythm of the character, a man struggling with a troubled past who often spoke with the slurred, uneven cadence of one who frequently consumed spirits. Beresford, however, repeatedly ordered endless retakes, attempting to force a smoother, more conventional rhythm into the performance, one that fit his own preconceived tempo rather than the character's truth. The artistic friction finally reached a breaking point when Duvall snapped back at the director, insisting upon the essential truth of his work. A drunk man never speaks slowly. The director refused to compromise, proving to Duvall that he prioritized technical control and a preconceived notion of pace over the honest, complex reality of the character. This clash of convictions led to Duvall's most audacious act of professional rebellion, one worthy of a rebellious protagonist. Feeling that the soul of his performance was being eroded by the director's interference, Duvall resolved to protect it through clandestine means. He secretly filmed one of the film's most crucial scenes, the emotional church performance of the song Tender Mercies at dawn, without informing Beresford or the crew, relying on a trusted cameraman. This stolen take, captured in the perfect, untroubled silence of the morning, became the emotional centerpiece of the entire film, a moment of profound, raw authenticity that could never have been achieved under the director's stifling demand for technical perfection. It was the scene that earned Duvall his Golden Trophy, secured by his own rebellion against technical interference. The brilliance of the performance was undeniable. When the Academy recognized the film with 2 Oscars, including Best Actor for Duvall, the industry celebrated. But on that night, Duvall brought his quiet battle onto the world stage. As he stood at the podium to accept his Golden Trophy, he bowed to the screenwriter, thanked the crew, and acknowledged his co-stars. But in a silence that hung heavy and awkward over the international broadcast, he deliberately skipped the director's name. The public snub was immediately apparent and made international headlines. The next morning, headlines like, "Duvall ignores Beresford at the Oscars," ran across Hollywood trade papers. Beresford later told the press, "I respect him, but we can never work together again." Duvall never offered an apology, choosing instead to justify his decision on
the highest possible terms, famously stating, "Sometimes you have to choose loyalty to the character or to someone else." Duvall's career, defined by his willingness to choose the character over the colleague, continued. He went on to write and direct The Apostle, a passion project that served as his ultimate statement of artistic independence, proving that he didn't need anyone controlling his creative or emotional output ever again. These 6 conflicts, with friends, mentors, idols, and collaborators, were all waged in the name of a singular artistic code. Next, we look beyond the feuds to understand the enduring code of this fiercely principled artist, and how the shadow of these battles solidified his legacy as a man of true integrity. The legacy and the new enemies of art. We have spent our time exploring the bitterness, the betrayals, and the profound disagreements that shaped Robert Duvall's career, moving from personal injury to philosophical contempt. Yet, to reduce these conflicts to mere feuds of ego would be to misunderstand the man entirely. These were not battles fought over celebrity or spotlight, but high-stakes philosophical struggles waged for the very soul of the acting craft itself. Duvall's final legacy is not defined by the men he opposed, but by the unwavering principles he defended against them. Duvall's artistic code was simple: authenticity, discipline, and respect for the character above all else. His conflicts with Al Pacino and Francis Ford Coppola were fights for respect, challenging the notion that a contribution to a cinematic masterpiece could be devalued for a financial expediency. His disdain for Marlon Brando and Stanley Kubrick was a defense of the human element, a protest against brilliance that turned cruel or chaotic in the pursuit of a flawless image. And his silence at the Oscars was the final, indelible act of choosing loyalty to the character over the manufactured camaraderie of Hollywood. As time passes, the controversies surrounding the men on his blacklist often linger, casting shadows upon their dazzling achievements. Brando's legendary indiscipline remains part of his story. Coppola's difficult methods are still discussed, and Kubrick's relentless drive continues to be debated in academic circles. Duvall, by contrast, has seen his reputation only solidify, earning increasing respect for his quiet integrity. He proved that an actor could achieve greatness without the sensational transformations of a De Niro or the histrionics of a Brando. However, the war for the integrity of cinema did not end with the retirement of his contemporaries. Duvall maintained a skeptical eye on the emerging era of Hollywood, where the spectacle threatened to overwhelm the story entirely, reducing the subtle art he cherished to a technological afterthought. His code was soon challenged by 2 new forms of professional betrayal: the director who prioritized CGI over the human face, and the executive who openly sold the soul of cinema for global profit. We continue our journey through Duvall's quiet resistance against New Hollywood. The director who stole the scene, the tyranny of the digital image. If Marlon Brando represented the chaos of an actor's ego,
and Stanley Kubrick, the tyranny of the camera's technical eye, a new generation of directors presented Duvall with a different and perhaps more insidious kind of threat, the tyranny of the digital image. This was the era where directors, consumed by spectacle and the seemingly infinite possibilities of post-production, prioritized expensive set pieces and computer-generated imagery, CGI, that often eclipsed, rather than supported, the raw, authentic acting performance. Duvall viewed this approach as the ultimate theft, the director systematically stealing the scene from the actor, replacing human vulnerability with digital perfection. Duvall, ever the consummate professional, found himself working under a contemporary director who perfectly embodied this shift. A filmmaker known for massive, effects-driven blockbusters, with budgets rivaling that of small nations. Duvall took the role, perhaps as a challenge, but soon found his artistic process completely marginalized. During the production of a sweeping historical epic, the director began to demand extensive post-production alterations that systematically minimized Duvall's subtle, powerful work. The director cared less about the quiet intensity of Duvall's performance, the work built on decades of disciplined restraint, and far more about the flawless digital rendering of an ancient, fantastical city and the perfection of the exploding background. The actor's performance was merely a foreground element, not the emotional driver of the scene. The conflict centered on a pivotal emotional scene, a moment of raw, contained grief, where Duvall's character faced a profound internal reckoning. Duvall had crafted a masterclass in stillness and internal struggle. The director, however, insisted on shooting the scene entirely on a complex green screen set, separating the actor from the physical reality of the environment entirely. This process forced Duvall to perform to empty space, relying purely on imagination, a process he felt cheapened the emotional connection. Later, in the editing suite, the director layered in so many distracting visual elements, a digital thunderstorm, a massive background army in motion, elaborate dust particles, unnecessary camera shakes, that Duvall's subtle emotional work was completely lost in the noise and spectacle. Duvall's reaction was measured but devastatingly philosophical. He reportedly confronted the director, not with anger, but with a mournful, profound question that cut to the heart of the craft. If you paint the entire wall with gold, how will you see the small, true portrait? He lamented that the director was so consumed with painting the wall, the spectacle of the environment, that he
failed to see that the actor's face was the true canvas, the sacred space where emotional honesty resided. He saw the work as less about human truth and more about video game aesthetics, where every frame was saturated with unnecessary detail. To Duvall, this director was reducing the actor to a mere texture in a vast, pre-designed painting. He criticized the rising trend of prioritizing the effect over the cause being the human emotion that should drive the camera, not the other way around. He saw the director as an artistic coward, one who was afraid to trust the power of silence, the unadorned close-up, and the inherent drama of the human face reacting to genuine emotion. This preference for the elaborate, external digital world over the quiet, internal, emotional world represented a profound decline in cinematic values. The director's approach was seen as an arrogant assertion that technology was inherently superior to, and more reliable than, human experience, a belief that systematically eroded the very foundation of the method that Duvall held sacred. He saw a future where actors would be entirely replaced by digital avatars, stripping the industry of its soul. This encounter reinforced Duvall's belief that his style, the quiet, truthful work of the Golden Age, was becoming functionally obsolete in a new Hollywood obsessed with noise and excess. He viewed this director as the physical manifestation of the industry's aesthetic decline, a man who saw actors not as artists to be collaborated with, but as expensive props to be placed within a digitally crafted environment. The integrity of the performance, once sacred, was now merely another layer to be added or subtracted by an effects editor. This final artistic disappointment only fueled his deeper contempt for the financial forces that mandated this spectacle. The ultimate studio sellout, the price of the commodity. If Duvall's artistic code was challenged by directors who valued spectacle, it was utterly affronted by the cold, ruthless logic of the studio executive who valued only dollars and market share. This final, most comprehensive philosophical conflict was embodied by a powerful studio head who, unlike Coppola, made no pretense of artistry and saw no shame in reducing cinema to a financial vehicle. This executive openly championed the commercial marketability of every element of production, treating the art form as a factory commodity designed for maximum return above all else.
The executive, whom we shall refer to as Mr. Global, once stated in a public forum that a film's artistic merit was entirely secondary to its four-quadrant marketing potential, its sequel viability, and its ability to launch spin-offs and merchandising campaigns. Duvall, who had struggled since childhood to elevate his work above mere vaudeville and performance, viewed this sentiment as the highest possible blasphemy. To see the pursuit of authentic human experience, the goal of decades
of disciplined work, reduced to a marketable commodity, was to witness the death of the artistic dream itself. The flashpoint for this conflict came when Duvall, exercising his later career influence, proposed a small, intensely emotional drama, a film perfectly suited to his restrained, truthful style, focused on human relationships and quiet moral struggle. This was the type of character-driven drama that the Golden Age had perfected and that the new Hollywood had largely abandoned. Mr. Global rejected the project with chilling corporate efficiency, reportedly telling Duvall that the film lacked ancillary brand synergy and that the emotional depth was too niche for the global market. The executive explicitly stated that the project did not contain enough pre-sold elements, meaning it wasn't based on a comic book, a video game, or a sequel, and therefore had no financial justification to exist. Duvall, a man who had built his career on the very nuances the executive dismissed, saw the rejection as a final, comprehensive institutional betrayal. He saw in Mr. Global the full, cynical maturation of the greed that had begun with the pay disparity in The Godfather Part 3. This was a figure who viewed every script as an economic spreadsheet, every actor as a bankable variable whose success was measured not by critical acclaim, but by global box office gross and toy sales. The executive symbolized the complete triumph of commerce over conviction and the final corruption of the Golden Age ideal. The entire decision was based on metrics, not merit. In a rare public interview, Duvall offered a philosophical lament directed at this executive class that perfectly captured his disdain. They are selling the frame before the paint is dry on the canvas. He argued that New Hollywood was now utterly obsessed with the packaging, the release date, the marketing budget, the merchandising potential, before ensuring the product, the human story, possessed any genuine artistic value. He accused them of prioritizing the business of cinema over the art of cinema, sacrificing cultural contribution for short-term profit. He argued that this focus on the financial frame would eventually lead to a sterile, predictable cinema devoid of the very human struggles that give art meaning. This studio head was the inescapable culmination of every force Duvall fought against. The financial betrayal of Pacino, the disrespect of Coppola, Brando's commercial indifference, the technical tyranny of spectacle, and the overall cheapening of the actor's work into a measurable, risk-averse commodity. In the quiet world of Robert Duvall, the fight for the actor's soul was a lonely one, but the sight of the commercial executive selling that soul openly solidified his final, principled withdrawal from the center of the Hollywood machine. The integrity that defined his career was the last true challenge to the executive's sterile ledger book. We want to know, which of Duvall's conflicts, the actor's ego, the director's tyranny, or the executive's ledger, do you believe did the most lasting damage to the art of cinema? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. Now, we turn to Duvall's final quiet victory. Beyond the feuds, the enduring code of an artist. We have spent our time exploring the bitterness, the betrayals, and the profound disagreements that shaped Robert Duvall's career, moving from the personal injuries of his colleagues to the vast, impersonal tyrannies of the modern studio system. Yet to reduce these conflicts to mere feuds of ego would be to misunderstand the man entirely. These were not battles fought over celebrity or spotlight, but high-stakes philosophical struggles waged for the very soul of the acting craft itself. Duvall's final legacy is not defined by the men he opposed, but by the unwavering principles he defended against them. Duvall's artistic code was simple: authenticity, discipline, and respect for the character above all else. His conflicts with Al Pacino and Francis Ford Coppola were fights for respect, challenging the notion that a contribution to a cinematic masterpiece could be devalued for a financial expediency. His disdain for Marlon Brando and Stanley Kubrick was a defense of the human element, a protest against brilliance that turned cruel or chaotic in the pursuit of a flawless image. His contempt for the director of spectacle and the corporate executive was his final stand against the death of artistry in the age of global commerce, a stand against the commodification of the human heart. And his silence at the Oscars was the final, indelible act of choosing loyalty to the character over the manufactured camaraderie of Hollywood.
As time passes, the controversies surrounding the men on his blacklist often linger, casting shadows upon their dazzling achievements. Brando's legendary indiscipline remains part of his story. Coppola's difficult methods are still discussed, and Kubrick's relentless drive continues to be debated in academic circles. Duvall, by contrast, has seen his reputation only solidify, earning increasing respect for his quiet integrity. He proved that an actor could achieve greatness without the sensational transformations of a De Niro or the histrionics of a Brando. His work stands as a testament to the enduring power of internal performance. The ultimate vindication of Duvall's principles arrived in 1997 with the release of his passion project, The Apostle. Duvall not only wrote, directed, and starred in the film, but also personally financed a portion of the production. The film was a masterclass in his own style, a character study built on stillness, emotional depth, and utter authenticity. By taking complete creative control, Duvall proved, beyond any doubt, that he did not need the studio system, the controversial director, or the compromised friend to achieve profound, undeniable artistic greatness. The Apostle
became his definitive cinematic statement of independence and faith in his own process, a testament that the quiet, true portrait would always endure, regardless of the golden walls built around it. In the end, Robert Duvall's story is a profound lesson in the endurance of character. He refused to allow the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown to dull his ethical edge. He lived by a code forged in a military household and honed in the early days of the neighborhood playhouse, a code he carried unbent to the very end. His refusal to compromise solidified his standing as an artist of quiet distinction, reminding us that true greatness is often found not in the spectacle, but in the unwavering commitment to one's fundamental truth. The quiet dignity of Robert Duvall remains an unmatched example of artistic integrity. If this exploration into the ethics of classic Hollywood touched you, please consider sharing it with a fellow lover of cinema. We thank you for joining us on this journey through the philosophical battles that defined one of cinema's most principled masters.